The light is there when you die, but it's not God, it's tech. It's tech. It's technology. And what happens is it produces a wave. Once you pop out of the body, it produces a wave, a strong wave, and there's a light, and you're drawn to it like a moth drawn to light. And it feels really great. It's a wave that produces a positive feeling in you. But as you get closer into it and drawn into it, it becomes like a fly trap. The more you struggle against it, the more you get stuck in it. And then you get to a spot where you get hit with essentially like a bolt of lightning. Very high voltage electricity that's way higher voltage than a lightning bolt. And you get zapped is basically what happens.
Welcome back. I'm here again with Dr. Courtney Brown. Dr. Brown, welcome back.
It's my pleasure.
I think you left us with this conflict between positive and negative ETs. Where are we now in this conflict? When do you think it's going to come to a head? I think you've alluded to it was probably in our lifetime.
Yeah, it's actually accelerating fast right now. So the process for what we call the good ETs, they're helping to sort of bring it to a head quicker. The bad ETs use crises. They manipulate world crises all the time in order to get the humanity into a state of chaos. And so when humanity is in a state of chaos, then it's no longer trying to focus on what the extraterrestrials are doing. And that's how you keep humanity in a constant state of turmoil that lets the ETs do whatever they want to do. That's the bad ETs. So the good ETs want that to stop. But in order for that to stop, the good ETs are fanatical followers of free will. So they have to get someone to make free will decision to embrace the good ETs and to not be aligned to the bad ETs. And the U.S. government, as I mentioned before, has written agreements with the bad ETs to allow them to operate in the Earth environment, which they're basically doing a human trafficking, the largest human trafficking operation anywhere, and in exchange for tech transfer. So they have a crash retrieval program, which is no longer in dispute. It's been talked about in congressional hearings. And the ships are being shot down by the American Secret Space Program. And then the U.S. government goes out, collects them, and then brings them in. Those are the ships of the good ETs that are being shot down. And then, so what you have is a situation where the process of disclosure is requiring someone to make a decision to align themselves with the good ETs rather than the bad ETs. Since human leadership is totally corrupted, it can't come from the leadership. It's got to come from the masses. So that's when these crises, world crises, are building to a point where it will get to a point where it looks like you're going to get planetary meltdown. That's when the good ETs can intervene, and that will change what's currently a cold war between the good ETs and the bad ETs into a hot war, and there will be a shootout. And that's when the disclosure process is fully unclosed, fully There'll be no hiding it. And, you, Sean, and everybody else will see it. You just look up. You're talking about a major shootout. And at that point, the bad ETs are going to be confronted with a planet that they can no longer control using psychological manipulation, and a militarily superior force of the good ETs, with which, if they had a battle, they'd lose personnel and ships. And at that point, the bad ETs are expected to withdraw. Now, we don't know if that's exactly what will happen, but that's the plan. And the bad ETs are very logical beings. So if that happens, so the bad ETs are trying right now is to prevent disclosure at all costs. And once you get disclosure full blown, then the bad ETs really can't control things any longer.
And how close are we to getting full disclosure?
The world crises are growing exponentially as we speak. So it's your guess as good as mine. Even the good ETs don't know the exact timetable. But at some point, you're going to get a situation where people are going to be talking about the possible use of tactical nuclear weapons, and then things spilling out.
When the United States and China clash, the world will never be the same, especially when forces beyond reality threaten to intervene. What if the United States went to war with the People's Republic of China? How would these rivals fight for supremacy on land, sea, air, and across the stochastic streams of time? What wonder weapons would be unleashed? What horrors would emerge from the irradiated sludge of the South China Sea? What heroes would rise and forever change the course of history? Tread into the deepest and darkest dimensions of the multiverse, gaze through a kaleidoscope of fractured realities, and bear witness to the disturbing visions of World War III from today's greatest minds in science fiction, fantasy, and horror. Weird World War, China. Available now from Bain Books at bain.com.
I mean, it looks, we just had a project that we released just days ago on Israel's future. And it's on farsightprime.com. That's our major streaming service, farsightprime.com. And anyone who wants to see Israel's future with regard to timelines where peace is sort of near term versus war is near term, they should see that project, because we have the best remote viewers on the planet Earth, most highly trained remote viewers on the planet Earth, certainly the most experienced remote viewers on the planet Earth and they're the only ones that have full-blown major public projects, public, not private, public projects that go back years and years and years. You can see who they are and what their capabilities are. And those people working always under totally blind conditions, scientifically very defendable, totally blind conditions, come out with, totally corroborating reports, which is amazing by itself that they all come up with the same stuff. These are the best on the planet. And so what you get these are among the best on the planet, but certainly the most well-published by far. Then there's no doubt about that. That's not even close in dispute. So what you can get is these crises that are happening in the world are growing exponentially and big time. And what you are also getting is a situation where the good ETs, in order to seriously get involved, have to have this free will decision on the level of the masses. They don't need the free will decision on the level of the leadership, but at least on the level of the masses, to have the planet align itself with the good ETs rather than the bad ETs. So we're really just waiting for the crisis to boil out of control. And it's not yet at that point, but it's getting in that point. I'm assuming that you're going to get a meltdown of the U.S. government come around January and December also, no matter who wins the election.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, so you're going to get a complete meltdown, and you may even have military groups breaking off. Because at the end of the 2020 election, you had 124 admirals and generals sign an open letter talking about corruption in the electoral system and wanting to reevaluate the 2020 election. Now, they were recently retired, but still, that means that there is a huge body of military admirals and generals that would end up siding with one side in the election. And the senior Pentagon leadership, the most senior of the senior, have openly worried that the military may split. If you have a situation, let's say Kamala Harris wins the election, and then Donald Trump shows up on Inauguration Day, you could have a situation where half of the military would say Donald Trump won. And then the other half...
more than half. I think it'd be
more than half. And now, if Donald Trump wins, you get the exact same thing. The liberal side, the Democratic side, the slightly more liberal side of politics, they're not going to accept sitting down a Donald Trump presidency. So you're going to get conflicts no matter which way you go. And the military will potentially split. Anyway, we have a whole project on the aftermath of the 2024 election, and it just comes apart. So you get sort of the unraveling of the American political system. But it's clear that it's not going to be just like an election, and then everyone will say, "Okay, that's it.
Yeah, it's all over, right?
It's all over." That's not going to happen. So
There's too much noise in the system to trust the system anymore.
way
That's
too
the
much
problem.
noise to trust the system.
Right.
No one's going to trust it. So anyway, so that's what's going to happen. So you have the meltdown of the American political system. Then you have the Middle East stuff cracking up, and it's going to become a global situation. Russia's going to start getting involved. China will start getting involved. The Taiwan thing may happen at the same. All these crises. What you're seeing is the building happening now, but it hasn't exploded yet. We're waiting for the explosion to happen to the point where it just gets totally out of control. So I'm assuming that that won't happen until 2025, because you're going to have to wait till the American system boils out of control as well. So when you get the American system boiling out of control, the Middle East boiling out of control, Ukrainian system, the Europe boiling out of control, and maybe China as well. And then somebody's going to start thinking about tactical nuclear weapons to sort of stop everything. That's when it'll hit.
To advertise on Through a Glass Darkly, email throughaglassdarkly@gmail.com.
So,
But
to
I'm
be
assuming
brief.
that will not happen until after the American elections. It won't happen at that level until after the American elections. When the conflict in the Middle East kicks up, you're going to get the military, the U.S. military involved also. And so, everything's got to ratchet up. It's going to take time for this to happen. But when it comes to the possibility of planetary destruction, that's when the good ETs will be able to intervene. And that's when you get the shootout. Now, the shootout is an actual project that we have coming out on farsightprime.com in about 6 days. So if you want to see what the shootout's going to look like before it happens, you only have to wait a week.
Interesting. Yeah, so this could all come out before the end of the decade, right? There's this number that keeps
way before the end of the decade.
There's
Way
this
before
number
the end of the decade. In fact, it's the bad ETs that keep kicking it down this. They're heavily involved in the channeling community, where the channels themselves are the most wonderful people on the planet Earth. But they're like, okay, Sean, if you take your car and go park it outside on the street and keep the windows open and the key in the car. Now, there'll be honest people that'll go by and say, look, the person left the keys in the car and the window's open. What should we do? Should we call the police? No, just let it be. They'll come back. They must know what they're doing. But you get some crook coming by and that's going to jump in the car and say, this is great. And they'll steal your car. So who's going to mess with your car? Is it going to be the good guys or the bad guys? So you have a channel opening themselves up for communication with whoever. They don't know these people, know nothing. Well, the good guys aren't going to jump in and mess with you. It's the bad guys going to say, this is great. And they jump in, they grab the keys. And you see, channeling is not remote viewing. Channeling is where you literally give up your body and voice and everything for a temporary piece of time, and somebody else comes in and starts talking. Who's going to do that? The good guys or the bad guys? So what the bad ETs have been doing is manipulating the New Age community through a flood of channeled information that is just really garbage. And they're trying to make it sound as if the as if the extraterrestrials are basically of one mind, and they're good and they're warm brothers and sisters, and they're waiting to embrace humanity. And the only problem is humanity has to grow up and get a little bit more mature, and then disclosure will happen a few years from now, and then they kick the can down the road 5 years from now, and by the time the new 2035 comes around, they keep kicking the can down the road. You're almost there, you're almost ready, and then the whole galactic community is so loving and warm and ready to embrace you. That's all bad ET shit. It's not true. None of that is true. It's as above, so below. There's good guys and there's bad guys. And the bad guys are the ones who are manipulating the channeling community. And they come across as great. They've had millions of years to figure out how to exactly imitate the good guys. So they come across seemingly loving, bubbly, having great personalities, and they spew all types of bad stuff that's ridiculous. I'll give you an example. A popular story that's out is that the Greys, a group of extraterrestrials, it's a species, it's a genotype that actually they're on the good side and the bad side. There are Greys that work on the bad ETs and Greys that work with the good ETs. But the story is that the Greys had their own civilization and they selfishly destroyed their own environment. So bad that they had to go underground and start having civilization. Their whole civilization went underground because the environment was just wrecked. And then there was confinement. They didn't have much space underground, so they started messing with their genes to make their bodies smaller. And then live birth was sort of a pain in the butt, so they started test tubing the birthing process and things like that. And then they came out eventually, and then when they eventually came out, they realized there was a dimensional shift, and they came out somewhere else, and they said, "What happened?" And then they said, and they also started messing with their emotions. They blamed their emotions on their ability to destroy their environment. So they were messing with the genes so that the brains wouldn't have emotions. And then they came out and they said, "Oh no, we're at a dead end now. We can't reproduce and we don't have emotions. We got to fix this." What did we do? So they went to the Galactic Federation to get permission to come to Earth, and they get permission from all the people that are being abducted to help transfer genes into the gray species to produce this new species called the Essassani, which are hybrids between good ETs and between, the humans and grays. That's total bullshit. None of that is true. And what actually happened is there was a species that looked very much like us, and they had a little bit more heavy emotionality. They were more emotional than we are. But nonetheless, they were just like us. You would be very comfortable with them. They were conquered by the reptilian group. Now, the reptilian group, they always work with proxies. So they have mercenary forces that work under their control. Anyway, through them, they conquered that society, that group, and an entire species was enslaved. And they put them into genetically modified bodies that we now know as grays because they needed a workforce that would do horrible things out there in the galaxy, including on Earth with the abduction phenomenon and things like that, where people would be having experiences that were horrible, screaming, having pain, things like that, being abducted, having fetuses put into bodies, taken out of bodies, and things like that. And they didn't want the workforce to react emotionally. They had to be neutral to do anything and without any type of emotional, no sympathy, no empathy with the people that you're screwing around with. That's how the Greys came about. They're a slave race that was genetically designed so they could be a worker bee force for bad ETs who wanted them to do things without having any type of emotional attachment with the people that they're working with. But in the channeling community, this is considered this old story of they ruined their own environment and stuff like that. So they didn't ruin any environment. They were conquered and enslaved and put into those bodies. And then what you have is a resistance among that group. And the way we call them, and the word Essassani is a word that's often used to describe the hybrids that are half gray and half humans as a result of this genetic engineering process that's actually being orchestrated by the bad ETs. Let me grab a book. David Jacobs, former professor at Temple University, now retired, he wrote this book and a bunch of other books, as well as John Mack, the now late professor at Harvard. But David Jacobs wrote his books. Walking Among Us is the last one, where he talks about the hybrids. Now, the hybrids, he actually uses the term hybrids, which are genetic mixtures between humans and grays that look and act just like us. They're indistinguishable from us, but they still have their mental abilities, the telepathic capabilities, mental manipulation, or neural engagement, as he calls it. So the reptilians said they need another species to help manipulate the planet. The ones that looked like us and acted like us, but they could still control them. The grays didn't work because they look different. They look like grays with the large wraparound eyes, and they look short and all that problems. And they don't have emotions, so they needed a new version. So they got human genes and spliced them into the gray genes and produced these hybrids. Hybrids are ones that still look weird. They're sort of humanish, but you can still tell they're not completely right. Hybrids are further, they've got more genetic material from humans, and that you can't tell from physically looking at them, but they still have the mental capabilities of the grays. So the reptilians are really good at gene manipulation. They're really great with that. And so that was a project of them to get that done. So what we have is a situation where there's a group of extraterrestrials that are grays, but they're free grays. And we call them the Essassani resistance movement. The Essassani, the word Essassani comes from the hybrids and hybrids that are produced by the bad ETs. And so we call the resistance movement the Essassani resistance movement because the word Essassani is a bunch of grays and hybrids and hybrids that are really aligned to the bad side. But they come across in the channeling community as tremendously bubbly and happy and embracing humanity and so on, but it's all crap. The Essassani resistance movement are a bunch of grays that are free and trying to free their brothers and sisters that are under the grips of the reptilians. Because they all came from the same early civilization, which looked like us. They were all captured, and they're trying to rescue those people. So the Essassani, so the word Essassani resistance movement means the resistance movement of the Greys to that particular hybrid organization that's being heavily used to manipulate humanity at this point. That's our view of things. That's how we look at this. But anyway, that's the situation. So, and you can sort of say, well, once they're free, why don't they just pop back into normal bodies? You can't do that. Once a Isby, we are considered Isbys. We don't use the word soul or spirit because of the religious baggage. So we use the word Isby, someone who is for the purpose of being. We are all Isbys, and when you have, and we live in these physical bodies. So when you have an Isby that's been in a gray body for a long time, they're used to that. So they don't just, you don't just pop them out and put them into a normal human body type thing. There's a morphing that has to take place. They have to slowly ease their way out of that. But the first step is they need to free themselves. So that's what's really going on right now. So the shootout is coming, but it's not yet happened. But it's not going to be like decades or even to the end of the century. It's sooner than later.
Yeah, there's a lot of years that are years that people are throwing out. 2026 keeps coming up, or 2027.
Even the good ETs don't know the exact date. So none of these dates are useful. They're all coming out from the bad ETs. They're throwing dates out there just as like dangling a carrot in front of a donkey's face. None of them know the exact date because this has never been done exactly like this. And you're trying to manipulate a mass, a planetary mass, a population that's incredibly complex, and you're trying to manipulate that into a point where crises became so intolerable that an extraterrestrial conflict will emerge. That's not, no one has an exact prediction for when that will actually occur. And even the good ETs don't know the month or the day when that will actually happen.
Now, how is this related to this concept of a soul trap?
Well, a prison is a prison. The planet Earth is being operated as a prison by the bad ETs. So a prison only works by keeping people in it. Otherwise, everybody would leave. Death used to be a means of transportation back in the ancient of days. And there was a galactic, this galaxy is a scene of a past Holocaust that was way worse than any Holocaust that you've seen on Earth. And the Holocausts on Earth have been horrific, but they were done by primitive people. For example, the Nazis in Germany, they used bullets with gunpowder and tanks and things like that, and aircraft that had gasoline and propellers. So imagine, and when they build the gas chambers and when they built the ovens, it was using crude, conventional type of stuff. Imagine what the Nazis would have done if it was like a million years from now and they had inventions. Most galactic civilizations out there in the galaxy, they've invented everything that can be invented. So imagine the Nazis not with the tech that they had, but really advanced tech. I mean, like really advanced tech, like thousands of years, hundreds of thousands of years more advanced tech. What would they have done? It would have been way worse than what we experienced in the 1940s. So that's what happened to the galaxy. And one of the technologies that was developed was how to capture an Isby after it leaves the physical body in physical birth. Let me give you an example of what actually happens when you die in another spot on the galaxy, especially in the free will area of the galaxy. You don't lose anything. You don't lose your family, your spouse. You don't lose your car. You don't lose your house. It's all yours. And no one makes the mistake of thinking your physical body is you. The ISBs, the whole idea of telepathic communication is a normal means of communication out there. When you're on an ET ship, you don't use English. You don't use physical language. You don't have the commander of the ET ship telling the gray guy on the piloting console, so let's go a couple kilometers down the road there, and then we'll make a right-hand turn and fly over the trees. You don't do that. Everything is mentally controlled, and there's AIs involved. Human ships can be piloted by humans only because they move so damn slow. You may be saying, oh, what are you talking about? Those are supersonic. Those are snail pace compared to the ET ships. So the entire process of having somebody die is different on Earth as it is compared to what is like out there. So what happens is when you die, this is what the tech happens. You see the light. You've heard a lot of near-death experiences. I believe, Sean, you said you were raised Catholic.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the deep things in religion is seeing the light when you die and embraced by God and things like that, and going to heaven and things. The light is there when you die, but it's not God. It's tech. It's tech. It's technology. And what happens is it produces a wave. Once you pop out of the body, it produces a wave, a strong wave, and there's a light, and you're drawn to it like a moth drawn to light. And it feels really great. It's a wave that produces a positive feeling in you. But as you get closer into it and drawn into it, it becomes like a fly trap. The more you struggle against it, the more you get stuck in it. And then you get to a spot where you get hit with essentially like a bolt of lightning, very high voltage electricity that's way higher voltage than a lightning bolt. And you get zapped is basically what happens. Now, you cannot kill an ISB. You cannot kill a person. You can kill their body, but the person inside the body cannot be killed. So the ISB cannot be killed, but it can be trapped. It can be confused. You can lie to an ISB. You can trick an ISB. You can zap an ISB. And when it gets zapped with this high voltage electricity, it loses all of its memories, and it loses the ability, it gets rattled. It loses its ability to have telepathy, which is the normal means of communication, and remote viewing. So what happens is, after the zapping occurs, an AI comes out, and it looks like a person, and says, we have been talking about your case with the Council of Elders. You see the Council of Elders sitting right over there? Yeah. Well, we've been talking about them. And remember the conversations that you had with your grandmother, the arguments, and your son and your daughter. You remember how there was disagreements and you were, yeah, we think there's a few rough areas of your personality that we think you'd probably like to work on and smooth out. But it's your choice. It's a free will thing. But you can decide for yourself if you'd like to go back and work on those things. Now, with no memory, rattled, no perceptual capabilities, everyone says, oh, that sounds like a great idea. I'll go back and work on those things. And so you get recycled back in. Now, if it's a near-death experience, you get recycled back into the same body, and you talk about, after you got out, you talk about how you saw the light, okay, and the Council of Elders. And then if you don't go back into that body, you get reborn into a new body as a baby. You come in with no memories, no nothing. You start all over again, and you think your body is you, and that's all there is, and that when you die, you hope there's a soul. But all religions were essentially started by the bad ETs, all of them. And so Jesus, for example, came down. He had a very good idea. He was associated with the good ETs. He had a very good idea. Spread the ideas of love being the energy that drives the universe, and that people, should just chill out, forgive and forget, and be happy. Those were great things, and it started to catch on. But that was in the context of a slave society where the Greek and the Roman gods were the way people structured their mentality. And there was a slave society. The Greeks had a slave society. The Romans had a slave society. And that was working. That was a good cash cow. And the bad ETs were able to control humanity through that means. And you had bad ETs like Zeus and Ra running the place as a prison. Zeus, for example, wasn't a god. He was a guy. He looks like you and me. He was just a person. He was a serial rapist. That's all he was. He was the warden of a prison. And he used to fly around with the ship with his group, and he used to go around and rape underage girls in front of their parents. That was Zeus. You don't build statues of the bastard. He should be in prison. Anyway, but that was who Zeus was. Same with Ra and all those gods that you hear about in Greek and Roman literature. They were real people, and they ran this place as a prison. And so what you have is those, and we have projects, for example, on Zeus. We have projects on Ra that people can see on farsightprime.com. And what basically happens is you have the religions becoming sort of obsolete. They weren't able to control the masses. The Jesus mentality that was sort of spreading, chill out, forgive and forget, that was sort of taking over. So the bad ETs manipulated the human leadership to say, okay, we're going to switch everybody over to this new religion called Christianity. And then they created saints, a saint for every Roman and Greek god. So you had a saint for this and a saint for that, and all the personalities were changed, but you get the same thing. And then they said, okay, now to keep things into control, we're going to change things up a bit. Now we have sin. And now you have to beg for forgiveness. You have to get down and beg for forgiveness. And if you don't beg for forgiveness on your knees, you're going to be banished to hell, into the fires of hell for eternity. But if you beg for forgiveness, we might just forgive you, and then you can have eternal life in heaven. Now, what are they talking about? They're so crazy. It's eternity either way. Burning for hell for eternity or in heaven for eternity. There's no one can grant you eternal life because you already have eternal life. It is impossible to kill an Isby. And so the stupidity of that idea of eternity, bad or good, hell or heaven, the obvious logical flaws should have been visible to everybody. But nonetheless, fear was introduced. And then you could have people saying, but I didn't do anything. Why should I be begging for forgiveness? And then they came up with the idea of original sin. But there's original sin. And you have to now be forgiven because of the original sin. Get on your knees, you will burn in hell for the fires of hell because of original sin. Do you get the idea? It's so stupid. But that's how religions get morphed. So the original Jesus idea was great, but it didn't operationalize very nicely later on because it was easily changed over the centuries. The difference now between now and then is we're trying to make the disclosure process happen quickly. If it happens, the problem with the Jesus idea is you're allowing the ideas to sift through humanity over periods of centuries, and then the bad ETs were able to manipulate that and control the agenda. However, if you have a situation that happens quickly, then the bad ETs can't control it. It spirals out of control. You get contagion and diffusion processes that make it impossible for the simple planetary manipulation stuff to occur. So we had to wait until the technology was available on the planet Earth to allow information to spread instantly, the internet. And it couldn't be with radio and television because with radio and television, you have certain broadcast beacons that can be manipulated by the people that are running the stations. But with the internet, with everything so diffuse, information going all over the place, and the availability of VPNs to bypass certain certain censorship things, we had to wait till that happened. And then you can get the spread of information on a global level quickly, like in a matter of an afternoon, days, an hour, 2 hours, a week, not centuries. And that's why the disclosure process is being so crucially developed now, and why the shootout is going to happen now, because the technology, it could not have happened thousands of years ago, but it can happen now. However, the Jesus thing was still worthwhile doing because it did still fundamentally change the way people thought. The whole idea that Jimmy Carter had, and when he was in the White House, he was the one who had the State Department institute human rights as a component of international relations. He was the one who started that. So that would never have happened had the Jesus thing not happened. So there were still residual good elements with the Jesus thing. But in order to get freedom for humanity, you've got to have this rapid, explosive disclosure process happening. And that couldn't happen until now when the technology was capable of doing that. And that's what we're trying to do now. That's the game that's going on right now.
Now, you mentioned in the earlier interview about humans being zombies. When this shootout starts, how's that gonna manifest or unravel?
It'll be a big shock, wake up call. What? And then they'll realize that they've been lied to by the authorities like forever. And obviously they can't deny that there were two sides at that point because they're shooting at each other. And then everyone will ask, well, what's going on? And you see, when you get the disclosure stuff going on with congressional hearings with David Grush and others, no one's asking what the ETs have been doing. They're just saying, are we alone in the universe? Do you realize how stupid that question is?
Yes, it's an
Every
extremely
single
stupid
interview
question.
with David Grush ends with the news reporter saying, David, does that mean we're not alone in the universe? What the blankety blank? Of course we're not alone in the universe. The question is, what have the ETs been doing all of these years? Do they fly across the entire galaxy to get here just to fly around and be tourists and they zip through the atmosphere and just sort of look down? No, they're here doing stuff. So the question is, what have they been doing? And then the question is, well, what have they been doing up there, but not just on here? And there was a galactic war. Now, the major galactic war is basically settled. So the Star Wars type of concept, George Lucas Star Wars, that's settled down now. But it's going to kick up big. If this planet is not freed, the potential exists for it to kick up again, because the whole process of controlling this planet is because they want to control the ISB population that exists here and around. So what happens is, around the Earth, there are these, what we call death traps. That's when, and you see them as soon as you die. You see the light, you get drawn into them, and it's very hard to escape. It's very hard to get out of them. So you have to know about them in advance in order not to get sucked into them. And because what you do is you die and you see the light and it just feels good and you get drawn to it. So there. So what we need is a planetary population whose the scientific community will focus their attention on identifying the death traps and discovering where they are and destroying them. The technology that is used to get the death traps going is very advanced. Even for the advanced ETs, it's very hard for them to find the death traps or the controlling centers. It really is. It's extremely advanced technology. Now, the societies that set them up no longer exist as they originally were. But the death traps don't go away. They have to be dismantled. And there's been some improvement in weakening the elements of the death traps. That's why we've been, since the ancient Egypt pyramid building days, that's when the bad ETs ruled the planet the way they'd like to rule the planet, where everybody's a slave running around in loincloths and building stupid structures like pyramids that have enormous physical size and enormous death and destruction in order to make them in the first place, and absolutely zero physical use. They produce no shelter, they produce no good, but they produce worship items, they produce awe, they produce shock, and they produce mysteries. And that's psychological stuff for controlling a population. So, but that's what the bad ETs would, that's the type of control that they'd have even now if they were left unhindered. But there was a military intervention back then and a couple times after that where the bad ETs were disrupted and they had to start operating from behind the scenes. So that is what that has happened. That has allowed a weakening of the death trap amnesia processing so that the memories can start coming back. And that's why we have high tech now. That's why we have buildings that look like buildings elsewhere in the galaxy. That's why we no longer build pyramids. That's why we no longer run around in loincloths. Now we have fashion shows and stuff like that and other technology. That's because of a weakening of the whole death trap process. The amnesia processing system has been degraded, meaning they have found a few of the centers where the death traps are maintained and operated and powered and things like that and destroyed them, but not all of them. However, one of the consequences of this entire galactic struggle that occurred is if you have a society that has been around for 1 million years, they've invented everything that can be invented. There's no inventions. Like with the good ETs and the bad ETs, neither one has a technological advantage over the other. They both have the same weapons. So when you have a society that's operating smoothly, you don't have a situation where people like artists and inventors are needed anymore. And artists and inventors and philosophers and things like that just get in the way. Those are revolutionary people that want to change things. But in those societies, everything is working the way they want them to work. And so I'll give you an example. Socrates, back in the ancient Greek days, they killed him. And what did he do? He went down to the marketplace and asked questions of people. All right? Now, that was his sin, to ask questions of people, to make them think. And they killed him. So can you imagine what happens in other societies when everything is going smoothly and inventors want to change everything around? They want to use different power sources. They want to use different that, and artists want to create revolutionary art to get people thinking in different ways. People get bothered by that, and they say, get rid of these people. So what you have is a situation where Earth is a prison where people, once they're thrown into it, don't get out. All across the entire galaxy, this was a convenient dumping ground. So you get the highest concentration of geniuses, inventors, artists, geniuses on Earth and as anywhere in the galaxy. You have hugely intelligent people on this planet. But you also get other people that other societies didn't want. Perverts, bad people, nasty people, people that have serious psychological disorders. They get thrown in here too. Because you can't kill an ISBE. So if you just kill somebody because they're a pervert, they're just going to be born again, come back as a baby and do bad things again the second time. So you got to get rid of them completely. And so throwing them at the Earth sort of gets rid of them in a more long-term basis. And so you get this mixture of extreme creative, intelligent geniuses and perverts. But that's why you get school shootings. That's why you get horrible things that you hear about with tortures and drug influences and all that. I mean, all that stuff comes out of these people that were thrown here because they had those tendencies. But that's why you also get extreme bursts of art, creativity. These are just things that are just right off the scale in terms of beauty and stuff like that. And genius stuff, that is also a result. And everybody's going to have been thrown here. So when we actually get to the point where we want to fully dismantle the death traps, we have to get the intelligence of the smartest people in the galaxy, which happen to be here already, to work on that problem. You have to be able to figure out where the death traps are, where the central controllers are, to dismantle them. And it's not easy even for the good ETs. It's not easy to figure that stuff out. So that's where the resources of humanity are going to have to be channeled when that time comes, after the shootout.
Now, in terms of these death traps, what happens if you avoid the light?
Well, there are other people that you could go to. There are people that are not involved in that. The process is not complete anymore with the death traps, but almost everybody gets attracted to the light, because how many people are listening to your podcast? How many people are actually, what's the percentage of the population that is actually aware of this process, of this stuff? So most people that live wherever, they just die and they see the light. So you're talking 99 and 9/10 or whatever, you're talking the huge proportion of the population simply getting reprocessed. And you're getting a minority, a very small minority, knowing to avoid the light. But yeah, you don't have, but then you're still stuck. It's very hard to get out. And ETs, the good ETs, they run the risk. If their ships get shot down and they get killed, they run the risk. If they're jolted, they run the risk of getting, if they're jolted, seriously jolted, and then they see the warmth, they run the risk of being trapped. And once they're trapped and recycled and zapped, and the memory and the amnesia process has been going on, the good ETs have trouble getting them back. Even they can find them, but they can't pull them back easy because they don't remember where they came from. They're zombies. That's why rescuing all of humanity is one step. The second step is getting people's memories back. And that's going to take some serious therapeutic action.
But it is possible, it sounds like.
It's very difficult, but it is possible. Yeah, it's not covered in your normal insurance
policy. Any final words for the audience, Dr. Brown?
There's two things. if you want to see, we didn't have a chance to show any of the. Do we have a chance to show any of the UFO photography that we do?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
All right, let me share my screen here. I'll get you to my Instagram page, which is okay. You should be seeing my Instagram page now. Is that correct?
Yeah, I see it now.
Okay, so let's go down. We have pioneered. It's not just remote viewing that we do. We're the biggest venue in remote viewing that exists anywhere, and our streaming service, farsightprime.com, is totally equivalent to the tech on a technical level to Hulu, Disney, Paramount Plus, whatever. Okay, but in addition to the remote viewing stuff, we have also pioneered how to take video recordings of UFOs, which is hard because they're all using stealth tech. Here's a picture of a UFO that was taken at a Blue Angels show over the Pensacola Naval Air Station in Florida. And it's that UFO that's right there. You see 4 Blue Angels jets and the UFO. All right. Here's the video of that exact same thing. See the UFO?
Yeah.
You see the Blue Angels jets? The Blue Angels jets look like they're almost stationary and the UFO is passing it. Now, when I video recorded this with our specially modified cameras in infrared at 120 frames a second, it's totally invisible. You cannot see any of the UFOs in visible light. And so you have to shoot wide angle and you have to shoot 120 frames a second. Those jets were going about 500 miles an hour, so that UFO was probably going 3,000 miles an hour or something like that. But, we have many video recordings. Here's some other, and this was taken right over my house, of a cigar-shaped UFO that's being operated by the reptilians. This is a reptilian ship. And you can see it passing the jet. See the airliner?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and it passed multiple times over my house, and you can see it there passing the jet. The jet was going about 500 miles an hour, and that thing was going around 20,000 miles an hour, which is about 32,000 kilometers an hour. And here again, you see it passing here, and that's a cigar-shaped thing, and you can see it's getting shorter as it goes on. That means it's moving up. Okay, so that's the type of thing we showed people how to do. How to take video recordings of that. And we have zillions of video recordings of these ships. So this is a orb. You see, that's an orb. Now, I have to be honest with you, Sean. I have made a major discovery, and I expect a Nobel Prize at some point, and you can say, put my name on it. But this is a major discovery that is shocking. We discovered through our serious and deep research with our modified cameras that all bugs and birds, when they fly, have wings. They have wings. We did that. We discovered that. And we also discovered, Sean, that when they fly, they flap their wings. Yes, we discovered that. Okay, so what happens is, how do you tell the difference between a UFO and a bug and a bird? Like when you see an orb like this, you have to zoom in and post when you're editing the film and look to see if it has any wings. And are they flapping their wings? So, when people say, that was just a bug. No, it's not a bug. Every single bug and bird has wings. So, we have determined that, and we have proved it scientifically. Bugs and birds have wings. So this is another orb and so see, these things you can see the orb coming in and out. These orbs sometimes you get solid reptilian, like cigar shape. You get all types of shapes coming out, but the other times you see these orbs. Now, we're assuming that the actual ships are not orbs, but that has to do with the propulsion system that's inside them. Okay, so then you get another one here where you'll see it eventually more clearly. There you see it coming down. You have to search for these things, and it's like going fishing when we go out shooting. So anyway, that's what we do. We look for these things. Here's where you have 2 ships coming in, 2 UFOs, and they pass each other. So we deal with that, and some of them are really clear. Really clear, like you saw with the airliner and the cigar-shaped UFO passing, and others are orbs and things like that. You get every type of possible configuration. But one thing that's common is they are all using stealth tech. They don't want to be seen. And you have to shoot wide angle because you can't see them. You don't know where they are. You can't zoom in with the camera lens because you can't see them. They're going 20,000 miles an hour, 32,000 kilometers an hour. So you can't follow them. So you have to shoot wide angle, and you have to shoot at 120 frames a second, and you have to shoot in infrared. So we have specially modified cameras that can do all that. And then in post, then you slow it way down and then you see them. They're not equally distributed all over the planet. We don't get many over Africa. We go to Africa a lot. We've gotten a few in Africa, but they're rare. But over Washington, D.C., it's like Central Park. I mean, and it's like Grand Central Station. There are just so many above Washington, D.C. Over Atlanta, they're all over the place. Over major cities, things like that, they're heavily there. But and we also on our website, our normal website, farsight.org, we show people how to actually take the video we show them the camera, the settings, everything to do this. And there's a large cottage industry that's actually starting, people who are following our methods and successfully making their own video recordings of the UFOs and posting them on social media. So, we're in the business of eliminating secrets. We're in the business of getting people to be able to verify. The disclosure movement right now is basically he said, she said.
Mhm.
So-and-so said this was that, and so-and-so said this was that. And as long as you keep it in the he said, she said realm, it's very easily manipulated or minimized. We deal with only raw data that we collect ourselves using a novel methodology, but we're very good at it with remote viewing. And we also use a novel photographic methodology for making video recordings of it, but we're good at it. So we're able to video record the ships, and we're able to go into the ships and tell you what's going on. And anyway, the many things that we do can be found on farsightprime.com. It's the only venue out there where you can see full-blown public projects. We have over 100 projects, and it took decades for us to assemble this library of stuff. But when the disclosure happens, people are going to want answers. And the only place on earth right now where you can get those answers is farsightprime.com. And that was the reason we built that, and it's technologically equivalent to any of the best streaming services. So we can't be brought down when a disclosure happens by just too many people wanting to see the movies. People will want to see that. So now we have thousands of customers that are actually wanting to see all of our projects. That will in a day turn into millions of customers and who will be watching these things, and the servers will still be able to handle it. So this took a lot of work to be able to get to this point.
All right. Well, Dr. Brown, it was an absolute pleasure, and look forward to talking with you again at some point.
Yeah, I should mention that my personal Instagram page is Courtney Brown Farsight, all one word. My name and the word Farsight, no spaces, no nothing. Courtney Brown Farsight, and that's free. It's on your phone, and you can see a bunch of videos like that. And then our regular website, farsight.org, and then our streaming service, where we have all of the major projects, that's farsightprime.com.
And I'll put the links below. So
Great.
Thank you again.
Okay.
If you enjoyed today's video, please hit like and subscribe, and also hit the notification button so you can be notified whenever I post new content. Thank you. Now, if you're enjoying the channel and you want to support it, there are several things you can do. In fact, there are 5 things you can do. The first thing you can do is just buy my books. I got plenty of books out in the market right now, and I would prefer that folks buy a book rather than giving me direct support, because they get something out of it. They get a real tangible product. The second way you can support me is by becoming a member on YouTube or becoming a patron on Patreon. And just go to either site and it'll explain everything. The third way you can support the channel is by checking out my merch site, which is here. There's plenty of stuff that you can get to support the channel. And I'd appreciate that you have it and can wear it. Not only do you help support the channel, but you also help promote the channel, and I appreciate that. The fourth way that you can support the channel, and this is really easy, is anytime you want to buy something on Amazon, literally just go to the description below and click on any link, literally any link. The channel gets a cut of that, and it costs you no extra money. You just go through the link, as I'm part of the Amazon Affiliates Club. The fifth and final way you can support the channel is through donations. Now, I don't prefer these because it's more of a expression of gratitude, but you don't really get anything out of it as a subscriber to the channel. However, if you decide to do these options, there's two options. There's Buy Me a Coffee, which is a separate site. And there's also, you can go through YouTube with either a super chat, super sticker, or a super thanks. Again, I prefer Buy Me a Coffee because that organization takes less money than Amazon does. But either way, I appreciate any support you are willing to give the channel. So thank you very much and keep watching. I really appreciate it.